Hi, everybody. Welcome to the FANAC FanHistory Zoom session for November 2025. Today, we are covering Seattle fandom from the nameless ones to the 21st century. And I will ask our moderator, Jerry Kaufman, if he would please kick us off.
Hi, we are calling this Slip Sheets in Seattle.
Oh,
We're going to talk about Seattle fan history, really starting with the nameless ones in 1950. We probably won't get to the 21st century today. That would require much more time than we actually have. We're missing one of our our speakers today, Gordon Eklund, because he's just had some kind of problem with his connection.
Literally 2 minutes before we started.
We're hoping he'd be able to get back on because we want him to talk about his experiences as a member of the Nameless Ones back in the early 60s. But for right now, there's four of us. I'm going to ask, we're going to start with Mr. Hooper. If each of you could introduce yourselves a little bit, talk about just maybe when you arrived in Seattle and what just some general stuff about yourself. Mr. Andy.
It's good to start with me. I'm the most recent arrival. I came to Seattle in the spring or the winter of 1992, and have been active here as part of the Vanguard group ever since. I also came here in order to attend Clarion West, the Clarion West Writers Workshop, and had a lovely experience there. And I think it made me a much better reader and fanzine publisher, but I have not become a pro as a result of it. My primary claim to fame is publishing fanzines. In Seattle, Carrie Root and I published the latter half of the run of our fanzine Spent Brass, and thereafter I started a fanzine called Apparatchik, which was a fast and frequent newsy-oriented zine that I later collaborated on with Randy Byers, Carl Juarez, and Victor Gonzalez. And then later, Randy, Carl, and I started a big genzine called Chunga. And we did, I believe, 24 or 25 issues of that. I have been involved in all of the Seattle Corflus. Corflu is a convention that's specifically focused on fanzine fans, and we've had it here 3 times, and I've been involved with all of those. So because of my interest in fanzines, I read a lot about Seattle fandom before coming here and thought it sounded like a lot of fun. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. John.
Hi, I'm John D. Berry. I moved to Seattle. I'm a fanzine publisher primarily in this context. I moved to Seattle in 1975 from Washington, D.C., where I was living by way of Regina, Saskatchewan, Vancouver, San Francisco, briefly LA, briefly Auckland, and Melbourne, Australia. So I was traveling with Susan Wood, who was one of the guests of honor at the fan guest of honor at the first AussieCon in 1975. And then I came back and settled here eventually. So I've been here except for about a 5-year break in New York and San Francisco ever since. When I came here, there wasn't a huge amount of active fandom. Susan and I rode down the coast to San Francisco with Frank and Anna Jo Denton, who Frank was a publisher of his own fanzines then. And Susan commented that it probably felt to them like they were taking the kids for a ride down the coast. I've published fanzines. I've also, with Lauren McGregor, started the Pacific Northwest Review of Books in 1977, which only lasted less than a year, but was a remarkable undertaking. And the rest, I think, comes out when we start the rest of the talk.
Suzanne Tompkins, a.k.a. Suzel.
Oh, hi. Well, I've been in fandom for a long time, 1967. and lived in New York City. Jerry and I lived in New York together and not together. And then I got out here in the late February of 1978. And immediately we knew one thing I loved about coming out here was that we already had friends who were here. I'd never been to Seattle, but I kind of already knew. 3 weeks after I got here was the first NorwestCon. So we started almost immediately to meet other folks in Seattle, both connected with fanzine fandom and not, and people from the Bay Area. So that was invaluable. I actually have a little quick story that I won't do now, about Eleanor Busby, who gave me a ride home from one of the days at the convention. Anyway, I've been a fanzine publisher since 1968. I was the co-publisher of Grand Falloon with Linda Eister Bushacre for her first 6 issues. And Jerry and I started the Spanish Inquisition when we lived in New York, and out here Mainstream, and which was another Genzine. Now we do Little Brook on occasion. And I've sort of been involved. I'm also, because I'm a meeting planner, I've ended up doing a lot of convention running type work, including all 4 Corflus. I consider the Vancouver Corflu kind of a Seattle Corflu. So I'm kind of involved in both ends of fandom and have been for quite a while.
Okay. We saw Gordon. I don't know. Gordon, are you on audio perhaps?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the video now, and I think I'm going to be back.
Okay. Well, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself to the assembled mob?
Yeah, I can do that. I need to connect another thing to get the video back on. But anyway, my name's Gordon Eklund. I am undoubtedly the oldest Seattle fan here. I originally got into fandom in early 1960 when I was 15 years old.
I think we've lost Gordon again. Well, I'll talk about myself then for a bit. Yeah, I got into fandom when I was 18. I was just shy of 18 in 1966, as the World Con was in Cleveland, and I was living in Cleveland Heights with my family. Did live in New York. Suzanne talked about our fanzine publishing and living. I came out here in the fall of '77, a few months before Suzanne, and got taken in by Lauren McGregor and Jeff Frayne, and was a third member of their household for a while. So Suzanne moved here, and then we got going. We did a number of interesting things, which I can talk about later, one of which was doing a live version of our fanzine Mainstream at 2 conventions in 1990, I think it was. And I've been involved with the Corflus and also with the more Circon Potlatches. So that's just a little bit about me. We'll, I hope, get into some of our strange doings later in the talk. So we'll start off by just first of all, I'll mention that there may have been a science fiction league chapter here in the late 20s, but we don't know for sure.
No,
we don't know.
no. I looked up the list of science fiction league chapters, and the closest one to Seattle was Lewiston, Idaho.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, but what we do know is that roughly 1949, at a regional convention in Portland, Oregon, somebody asked Bill Austin and another area fan why there wasn't a club in Seattle. And so Austin started having meetings. People decided on the name of the club, which was the Nameless Ones.
Well, let me correct you.
You'll go right ahead.
You've already gone off the rails. There were no
I'm
regional conventions in Portland, Oregon in 1949.
Mm-hmm.
There were virtually no conventions of any kind in 1949. The event you're talking about was the 1950 World Convention, which was held at the Multnomah Hotel in Portland, Oregon.
You're
And
off the rails.
that's that. So a number of Seattle fans, including
Hmm.
people who had been meeting at Bill Austin's Wolf Den bookstore at 8th Avenue and Pike for about 6 months, because Bill only opened the store in early 49. So there had only been a few months of kind of poking around and having beers and talking about SF. Um, and they had refused to come up with a name for their group. And then they went down to the Worldcon in Portland and suddenly met a whole bunch of other people that were living, within a few miles of them, that they had never known were interested in science fiction. So it was actually at a Worldcon, and okay, go start again.
Just as a
I go ahead, John.
just as a note, I was looking, and the Wolf Den would have been basically where the
Excuse me.
convention center is now, or we just had a World Cup, or well, within a block or so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I think its site would have been under part of the new convention center.
Hmm.
Right.
Ah, Jerry is on the phone to
It's someone
NORAD
calling who
command.
didn't get an invite to this. Why they called? Oh, keep going.
All right. So taking over for Jerry,
Thank you.
in the wake of that World Convention, a group of fans coalesced in Seattle, which include Bill Austin, uh, Royal H. Drummond, and Gertrude M. Carr in particular was very active and sort of um, was the one willing to take notes and pub stuff early on. So the nameless ones came into being uh, in very late 1940, no, in early 1950. And the first issue of Cry of the Nameless, which was originally a newsletter done on stationery that Gertrude Carr stole from her employer, um, was
January
sorry, I've lost the date.
1950.
Yeah,
It
it was
was
1950.
January.
Right.
So how could it have been January 1950 if the Worldcon in Portland was in the summer?
Well, yes, the nameless ones actually came into being. I mean, sort of began these, their activities before the Worldcon. And Gertrude published a number of issues of the newsletter. But apparently that was it was being sent to a very tiny number of people. And the group trebled in size after this event at the Worldcon. There was also another group in Aberdeen at the same time called the Terrans, that considered themselves friends or adjuncts of the nameless ones. But they were only around for 18 months to 2 years and then just kind of faded away. So anyway, the first enduring club in Seattle were referred to themselves as the Nameless Ones. And their most important members included FM and Eleanor Busby, Ray and Carol Ballard, Royal Drummond, Bill and Delcy Austin, and Wally Weber, who joined, I believe, in roughly 51 or 52, and quickly became editor of Cry of the Nameless. So
I believe that he joined much earlier because one of the issues that scanned and is on FANAC is addressed to him.
okay. All right. Well, maybe he was involved for a while before starting to write then, which I,
Yeah, all the newsletters, at least in the first year and a half, which are the ones that I read to prepare for this, were written by GM Carr or Gertrude. And she had a very jocular sort of not ironic, but she was attempting to be humorous and was not quite there in her style. I think she might have been influenced by. I'm just guessing she might have been influenced by the newsletters that were coming out of Los Angeles fandom at the time. Assuming she was on that mailing list, she might have been. She might not have been. I don't know. But they did stuff like they got movies in, they got speakers. They met at several different places. They may have started off at the Wolf Den, but during that first year, at least, they were meeting. Somebody had an inn at the University of Washington, and they were meeting in a meeting room in a medical building there.
And Bill only maintained the bookstore through 1951. So
Okay.
it was a relatively brief period. I don't know when Ray and Carol started running Horizon Books, but that was the bookstore, which was the meeting place for Seattle fandom for the longest period of time. Was still such when I came here in 1992.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that club coalesced, and I also should mention the other living member is Burnett Tosky, who just returned to the Seattle area after living in California and Arizona for a number of years. So he and Eleanor Busby, I believe, are the only two surviving members of the 1950s Nameless. And as Gordon was telling us earlier, he joined in 1960 and came in just before the World Convention. So this club that came together and had a very informal approach at the opening of the 50s, both managed to create a Hugo-winning fanzine, which was Cry of the Nameless. It was also nominated on 2 other occasions. And in 1961, they presented the World Science Fiction Convention, which was the first CCon, held at the Hyatt House Hotel in unincorporated SeaTac, Washington, next to the airport. So this year at the 2025 Seattle Worldcon, the trivia question was asked, how many world conventions have been held in Seattle, Washington? And the answer was 1, because there have been 3 in the state of Washington, but only this year's was in the city limits of Seattle.
John, you had a
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out, I'm not sure when in the 50s Cry evolved from a newsletter for the club to a major fanzine, but by the late 50s, it was one of the major fanzines. It was monthly. Its letter column was famous for getting all the conversations at Fandom. I know this in retrospect because I wasn't around. Gordon could talk about this if we can get his connection. But by the late 50s and early 60s, that was one of the major fanzines of the time.
And I think that's one of the big reasons that Seattle got to hold a Worldcon was because of the reputation and reach of Cry, included columns by Walt Willis, the Irish, Northern Irish fan writer, and John Barry, the other John Barry, the one that lived in Northern Ireland at that time, and Harry Carr, whose Random Harvest was a column in the zine toward the end of the 50s.
And both Buzz and Eleanor had columns.
So this
Irish
is
John Barry,
sorry.
Irish John Barry started the tradition of coming to Seattle. As far as I can tell, he's one of the first major traveling giant fans to make a major visit all the way out here in the Pacific Northwest. In 1959, he was the guest of honor at Detention, the only Worldcon ever held in Detroit. And afterwards, he traveled across North America, and Seattle was one of his last stops. And he covered it extensively in his publication, his one-shot, The Goon Goes West, which F.M. Busby published at the Seattle Worldcon in '61. And I have some copies of it, in fact, in my garage. Like I've got like 3 or 4 left of the original
Whoa.
set that were published in 61. So if anybody's interested in having one, feel free to reach out to me offline. So
I'm going to,
But
wasn't there
I'm sorry, after in the aftermath of that, in the aftermath of Barry's glowing reports of how much fun it was to hang out with people in Seattle, we become one of the most popular destinations for fan fun delegates, and we become the cradle of fan fun delegates ourselves. Jerry,
Somewhat
how
later.
many people in Seattle have won TAF and Duff?
Oh, a lot.
or
As it were.
Taft or Duff?
Hmm.
None
Okay.
of us have won both.
Even of the 4 of us, 3 of us are either Taff or Duff.
Hmm.
One of us tried hard. So at this point, I think we're going to have to skip over Gordon's experiences and memories of being in the nameless because he's not here. Darn
Jerry,
it.
he did write us, we have that write-up that you printed out earlier, some of
Oh,
which,
well, I could.
some of
were
it is just talking to us, but
it's
others will give it a little bit of background. Like he talks about Cry, and he talks about the nameless. He sent us his background, and I thought some of this might be interesting because we were really counting on Gordon for this period of time, even though he was a child when it all started here. And he doesn't seem to know that us 3 of us at least are only 3 years behind it. And but
okay. I'm going to read a little bit from this email that he sent to us. Uh, The club meetings were generally small during my time, 1960 to 63. Regular attendees included, besides the Busbys and Wally Weber, Jim and Doreen Webert, Wally Gonzer, Jerry Fram, GM Carr, Otto Pfeiffer, and me. And of course, I think there was also Jerry Fram's brother, Dick, who I think was still coming to Nameless meetings when we moved here in 77, 78. Apparently, the club underwent a bit of a boom after I left to join the U.S. Air Force, and a significant number of younger Star Trek fans started attending meetings. A couple of things I've been wondering about, though. Oh, no, we'll skip that. Um,
yeah.
let's see. It was also a high time for APAs. He mentions that FAPA and SAPS both had full rosters, long waiting lists, and mailings of 400 to 600 pages. Seattle fans were especially prominent in SAPS. Buzz, Eleanor, Wally W., the Weberts, Toski, and I were all members during the early and middle 60s and rarely missed the meeting. Now, SAPS,
Like
now, Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the second oldest fannish APA.
Excellent.
Amateur Press Association, for the few of you who may not be familiar with the term. Andy, you're in SAPS now, as is Mr. Barry.
Mhm.
Do you want to say a few words about the connections between Seattle fandom and SAPS?
Sure. SAPS was founded in 1947 in New Jersey as the Spectator Amateur Press Society, and it definitely was kind of an upstart alternative to FAPA, which was had a reputation as being a more Circon venue, and from relatively early in its history, SAPS always emphasized interaction between the members. In other words, mailing comments much more than FAPA did. People in FAPA often published their fanzines with the idea that they would be freestanding work that they could then hand out outside of the APA, and did a whole second zine for their mailing comments. SAPS, that was never a practice in SAPS. And for some reason, the eager young Neo fans who were building Cry of the Nameless and in part of the Nameless ones in the early 50s really took to SAPS and enjoyed the somewhat more whimsical and less Circon, arguably, nature of the interaction there. And SAPS almost died out in the late 1970s or early 1980s. And I believe it was Art Rapp who took over as OE and recruited all of the old nameless ones that were still living in Seattle in the early 1980s to join SAPS. And so that connection persisted over a long period of time. And the Burnett Tosky and Eleanor Busby are still members of SAPS, although Eleanor hasn't contributed for a number of years. But yeah, for some reason, uh, uh, Seattle fans dominated SAPS at various times across its history. And I think it was another important tool in building that reputation that led Seattle to get the Worldcon in '61.
I will say that when we moved here, not too many years after we arrived, we found out that older fans, Ray and Carol Ballard, were the official editors of SAPS, and they lived not very far from where we did. So we went to a number of the collations, which the Ballards turned into a party. They were very, very sweet people, I would say. And we had a wonderful time visiting them and helping out. But we never actually, Susan and I never actually joined the APA. Although
Another
I think
important Seattle fan in the nameless period and thereafter was Otto Pfeiffer, known as Blotto Otto. He was also OE, the official editor of SAPS for a while in the 80s. And I think it was he that Burnett Tosky took over from. And Tosky continued to run SAPS until the fall of 2024 when I became OE. So basically, yes, Seattle rules SAPS and with an iron hand and will not.
well, when John.
As a little transition, not SAPS related, I should mention my first visit to Seattle as an adult was in either 69 or 70, I think or maybe even 68. A friend of mine was, when I was at school at Stanford, when somebody I knew there was driving to Seattle for the spring break. So I rode up with him and visited the Busbys. They put me up. It was delightful. Buzz says, here's your beer. He made home brew, handed me one, said, after that is prompt, courteous, efficient self-service. And then he drove me over across town to the Nameless meeting in Horizon Books. So that was already in Horizon by then. Don Glover's Don Glover the Elder's bookstore, which he later closed, but there's still a bookstore in that space actually today. Ada's Books. Anyway, that was my little first visit to Seattle.
Yeah.
Well,
my first visit. Sorry, Susan.
Well, yours. Oh, I say, well, just when we first got out here in the late 70s, the Nameless was certainly still going at Horizon Books. And we used to have a joke about it. It was a Friday night, and we used to joke about it. Looks like a bookstore full of people drinking beer, because it is a bookstore full of people drinking beer. And
There's also okay.
that should have been all.
Oh, okay. Well, it was also a bookstore full of people, at least some of whom were smoking. So there were some of us who couldn't take the cigarette smoke and sat outside. That led to eventually to the founding of the Vanguard Party group. But so before we moved out here, at least in the 70s, there were a number of people who were publishing fanzines that many of us received, and that included publishers like Frank Benton, Paul Nowitzki, who was going by the name Alpaj Puri, and he may still have been in Portland at the time. There's Gordon.
Eugene. He never lived in Portland. Eugene, then he moved up here.
Eugene. I'm sorry. It's Oregon. It's all the same. No. Yeah. Yeah, folks, write me letters about that. Lauren McGregor, John Barry, Jessica Amanda Samuelson was publishing. Dennis Howard did at least one massive issue of his fanzine, Women and Men. The Cry, I think, had not been published for a while, and it was revived by the Busbys, and Vera Heminger And Vonda McIntyre was also involved in that because she contributed some articles to it. And I could not remember when I was making my original list, but Westwind started before we got here. The Northwest Science Fiction Society was founded, and we got here in time for the first Norwest Con in '78, and they have been publishing a club zine called West Wing.
Wind.
West Wing? West Wind?
West Wind.
No,
West Wind.
yeah, Westwind originally began
Thank you.
life as the Northwest Science Fiction Society newsletter. And Westwind, it changed its name to Westwind with issue 22 in November '78. So the numbering followed on from the earlier, more mundanely titled newsletter. And there was an attempt to do, this is all right. This was all in the Greg Bennett era of Seattle fandom, right? He was one of the founders of NSFS, the Northwest Science Fiction Society, and he was also one of the first editors of the newsletter and of Westwind. And he also published a genzine called Hydrazine, which was an attempt to do a larger group zine, but only one issue came out. So all of this is between '76 and '78, and then Westwind comes into being, and so does Norwestcon. And so we have that's the first regular local convention to start up in Seattle.
John.
They might not think of it this way, but I remember at the time when NSFS started, that to the rest of us old-time fans, it felt like they were reinventing science fiction in the 20s and fandom out of nothing, without context, which they did, and very successfully.
So now that
Right.
Gordon
It's a
is
shame
back,
that we don't have someone from NSFS in this group, because
You do.
since 1976,
Hello.
Hi.
we do have people watching. who
oh
are
yeah,
in
very
the
good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right,
participants who
well,
are-
I'll try not to talk crap out of my head then, but
No, you're
since
doing okay.
1976, it's been the primary organized, active fan group in Seattle. And none of us are particularly involved in it or have been, although I've certainly attended a number of Norwest cons. But they started they came together in 1976, and my understanding is that there was kind of an ambition, a shared ambition, to one day have another Worldcon in Seattle. And it took them until 2025, but the dream was eventually achieved. But if that second half of the story of Seattle fandom is dominated by NSFS, and their indefatigable engine for generating conventions. The great number of conventions actually run by fans in Seattle have been associated with NSFS or with the Seattle WesterCon Organizing Committee, or SWOC. Which put on a lot of conventions here. But gosh, I wish we could have we would have hunted up somebody, an actual NSFS officer, to be in this presentation, because
I can tell you a bit about the early Norwestcon years.
that'd be great. Jump
who
in.
is speaking?
That's
Well,
Miss Murray.
I just saw Michael Sichek online, and he certainly can talk about NSFS and the West.
yeah, I was
Michael is in the audience, and he's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
unmuted himself. Go, Michael.
I'm currently the chairman of the Northwest Science Fiction Society, mostly by accident, and I've been involved in fandom since 1975, and all the energy, in my opinion, that started with Northwest Science Fiction Society was all those crazy Star Trek fans that just found fandom and created it, and starting in '75. And put on some wonderful conventions that lost money, and then did some more and lost money, and then faded away. So all that group of energy just moved into the Northwest Science Fiction Society and Norwestcon with people who knew how to budget, like Greg Bennett, all these Boeing engineers who knew how to budget, as opposed to these Star Trek fans whose chairman kept the money in a sock. True.
That was when Craig Bennett showed up in '75, and he tapped into the group that had put on 2 little conventions and said, "Hey, let's do a Worldcon."
Yeah, my father has a barn. Let's put on a show. Yes.
And
So
I
they
cannot
did for the
find,
1981 Worldcon.
is that
Still have
Janice
that
Murray
map.
who's speaking?
Yeah,
I'm not
Yeah.
showing.
Okay,
yeah.
I can't see you. We can only see like six of the participants at a time across the top
So
of our
then the other
screens.
club that deserves credit for that then is Starbase Seattle, right?
The
Starbase.
And that
Starbase.
included Shelley Dutton, later
Yes.
Shelley Dutton Berry, and Carrie Dunning, who I miss Carrie so much. She was a great fan. And I
We
don't,
always called her Stunning Dunning.
Janice, were you involved in that? No, she muted again.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, she was involved in
Well,
the
anyway, yeah, a number of the Star Trek fans had feet in both the Vanguard group and NISVIS,
Mhm.
and that was kind of, the and also Jane Hawkins. Jane Hawkins Fudge was kind of the glue that held all facets of Seattle fandom together for 2 or 3 decades anyway. So,
Cliff Wind.
Yes,
and Cliff Wynn's
Wynn.
baklava.
Mhm.
And our housemate, our one-time housemate,
Bob
Bob
Doyle.
Doyle. And
Right.
I was just I'm trying to get back to Gordon so he can talk about
Yeah, I'm
his
here.
good. Your image disappeared again, but you can
It
talk.
was here for a minute.
It was.
Hey, yeah, we saw
Here
you.
I am, the top of my head. Whoops.
There we go.
You keep
There you
slipping
are.
off the pin.
Yeah.
Go,
They keep
Gordon.
trying to put a pin through you.
Don't mess with the microphone.
All right, Jerry,
Yeah.
what would you ask Gordon a question?
Hey,
Yeah, go
Gordon,
ahead, even if you can't
what
see
was
me.
it like being in the Nameless Ones?
It was strange. I was 15 years old. My first meeting, I was scared to death, of course. To get to downtown Seattle, my dad was kind enough to, quote, volunteer to work some night at his office in the Cobb building. So he drove me in. I got on the elevator at the building downtown where it was held, and Wally Weber and Flora Jones, who was a nice lady of about.
Oh no.
Oh no, you're muted again. You're not muted, but
Not muted. He's
He
just
just
lost
fell
it.
out. Yeah,
Oh
it just,
dear.
he just,
His image, he
we'll
still
never know how
occupies
old
us.
she was.
Oh dear.
It was probably GM car. I wanted to ask Gordon his impressions of her. Well, let's go on, go back to NorwestCon and events thereafter, and especially the great numbers of fans from other cities who moved to Seattle in that period. And we had a really blossoming of fanzine publishing when they moved here.
Mhm.
So, of course, we were the first wave. Because John had been here since 75, you said?
75, end of
I
75.
I knew John already, but I met other people in Seattle fandom in the summer of 76 when I came out to visit Seattle and several other cities because I was wanting to move out of New York. And so I knew the neighborhood and liked it a lot. And the Nameless Ones just met down the street from where John was and Lauren McGregor were
Lauren's
living. I
house.
mean, they were several different houses. They didn't live together.
Mhm.
But in short order, after we moved here, we got Patrick and Teresa Nielsen Hayden, Gary Farber, Kate Schaefer, Anna Vargo, Alan Bostic. Dennis Howard moved to Seattle just shortly before we did, I think. As Jeff Frame came from, I think he came from, did he come from California?
Portland, I think,
Anyway,
but
there were a number, and because we had Mimeo equipment in our basement room, by the time these people had all come to Seattle, we had moved into a two-story house with a basement. And we were sharing the house with Bob Doyle, who was a very active NISFIS member. Um, and so people came over to our basement to publish their fanzines. So we had a lot of Mimeo talk and a lot of getting
There was
together.
a lot of FANAC in the basement, which was the basement room, which was also our guest room and Jerry's office. Luckily, it was a big house.
Gordon, you're back again. Do you want to pick up where you left off?
Oh, yeah. I don't know why I was suddenly kicked off, but this is a wonderful world we live in.
So you were telling about the lady that talked to you the first meeting you went to.
Oh, no.
we left you in an elevator, Gordon,
I broke him.
or you left us.
I was trapped in an elevator at the Dublin WorldCon for an hour
Yeah.
with Edie Stern.
With Edie.
Yeah.
Right before a panel that was supposed to start. That's certainly not a Seattle story, but
Oh, it's not.
anywho.
I would like to point out that the early Norwest cons, as I understand that the organizers wanted to get professional writers to come from all over the place. And what they did was they simply wrote to them and asked them to come. Didn't like pay their way or anything, but just asked, and a lot of people did. So it had a
And
very high
they did.
proportion.
It was amazing. We had friends from New York coming in. Those were really good conventions and a lot of fun. We actually helped a lot. Jerry helped those early Norwest cons with programming, and there was after a while they actually did a fan lounge, and for years we were part of the people who ran that fan lounge, and so we sort of started a tradition there as well within Norwest Con.
We introduced a lot of people to fanzines, and even a few who ended up contributing to zines. We also made a lot of friends. The Seattle fans made a lot of friends with Bay Area fans and Vancouver fans, and Portland.
And at the Norwest cons, there were a lot of great parties. Jane Hawkins would usually host a really good party, and sometimes we'd have Mr. Tank, brought up from the Bay Area by Doug Font.
Yes.
Mr. Tank being a giant tank of nitrous oxide.
We also were introduced to things like munchies from Trader Joe's, which had not yet come to Washington State, and
Bay Area
the
fans
Bay Area people brought stuff up. Oh, and somebody says that Larry Very actually was the one who brought the tank.
Oh, right.
Okay, so it was Larry Very, who in the Bay Area hung out with Terry Gary, but who was living with Gatain. That's spelled Ctein. He liked it better than his real surname, which was Stein, but somebody typoed it, and he liked it better, so he called himself Gatain.
Still does.
I never knew that story.
Oh, yeah.
I just presented him as a fait accompli, so I never asked.
I always assumed it was probably Stein to begin with.
I assumed it was Welsh.
A high school friend typoed it. I've been spotting little things coming up on the in the chat, but I haven't been able to follow them all. Oh, that's Tom W. Okay. Let's see. Tom W. He started Fanzines Anonymous.
So let's talk about another thing that was very important to Seattle fandom, which is the Clarion West Writers Workshop. The late Vonda McIntyre started Clarion West in 1971 after attending the original Clarion workshop in 1970. And thought, well, that was fun. I'll do it myself, which, I mean,
she did for
sometimes
three years.
Sometimes the hubris and brilliance and ambition of fans just stuns me. But she basically ran the workshop herself for 3 years through 1973 and then collapsed in exhaustion. And then in the mid 1980s, another group of fans thought it sounded like such a great idea, and they basically reconstituted the workshop in 84, I believe.
84,
And
it was Marilyn Holt and JT.
right, Marilyn
Yes.
and right,
And JT Stewart.
and Jane Hawkins was also involved very early, I think.
I don't think she was
By
here.
the time I was a student in 92, Dave Myers and Leslie Howe had become the prime movers. But that has that's kind of been a charity. It's sort of been a thing that the Seattle fandom works to support. And eventually we invented a convention with the idea of raising money for Clarion West as part of its purpose. And that was Potlatch, which rotated between Seattle, Portland, and the Bay Area in the 1990s and up through about 2012? I can't remember when the last Potlatch was now.
2010, I think, but I have to look back.
Right. But that the workshop has produced a number of excellent writers over the years. Seattle fandom has benefited profoundly from the presence of professional writers who come and teach for a week every summer, and then will hang out with us at a party at the end of the week. And so I've met a lot of writers who were in town to teach the class. And it's really been a major source of enrichment for those of us lucky enough to be fans here.
And
yes, Susan.
It works both ways too. The original Clarion in Clarion, Pennsylvania, then ended up moving to University of Michigan, and where they were sponsored, right. Our Clarion and Clarion West, we started early on. We ended up creating what was basically the Friday party, and we would, all of us fans here with big enough houses, would open our houses to the classes. And what I think that that we did here, that fandom here did for Clarion West, it introduced the students to actual fans who would not see, fans at conventions as they were becoming writers, but they were also introduced to our fandom and to our what it means, what it really is. And it isn't go onto a convention, be on a panel, and sell your book.
Right.
It was,
who your readers really are.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that was, to me, I worked for Clarion West. I was their office manager for many years, and I still do work for them for about 20 years. So I have another background, but I thought the interaction was really good to introduce budding writers to SF fandom.
Absolutely true. And we should mention that it was quite almost traditional for a number of the writers who were not from here to end up moving to Seattle.
Oh, well, every year, and the students, we always
required.
we have a big, the zip code, the Seattle, the Pacific Northwest zip code has a lot of Clarion West students that go back to sometimes the 80s. Jerry and I are in the process of trying to locate all the students for various reasons. And so we have some background in that, but
I should point out that we're talking about Clarion West, that Eileen Gunn was on the board for, I believe, 23 years.
Yes,
she tends not to get enough credit for that, to keeping it from devolving into a Orson Scott card fest.
She was the branding czar. She emphasized with everyone, it's Clarion West. Not just Clarion. It's Clarion
Absolutely.
West.
Every time someone says Clarion and it's Clarion West, even if you don't say it out loud, I add West to it, because Eileen drummed that into us all.
We were sharing
that's off subject. Sorry.
We were sharing our house still with Bob Doyle, I think, in '84, and we decided to have a special party for the Clarion West students and local fans. And that was our red and black dance party. That was of course, it was my idea. We should have everyone come dressed in red and black. Great combination. Of course, one Michael Eichner came in orange and green. That was his idea. And we set up a DJ station in our living room, and Victor Gonzalez was our main DJ. I did
Right,
a
and
bit, and I
he
think
did it at a strip club, so he was a pro.
yeah, that's right.
Was that
Yes,
was that the
John?
party for which Randy Byers shaved his head into a checkerboard?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'd have to go back and find
It was
the photos.
around that time.
Anyway, it was
Yeah.
kind of a legendary party. People who were there still remember it,
Mhm.
but it was
That was
essentially the
legendary.
first Friday Clarion West party. And the other point I was going to make that I forgot was that the other Clarion never did anything like that. The original
Well, we
Clarion,
had
when they moved down to eventually, now they're in San Diego, which is in fact further west than Seattle is, but that's another.
No, it's not.
Anyway,
the
Huh?
I stopped
Yeah.
because Jerry's signaling me.
oh, I was going to say something, but you're not finished.
No, I think I was really.
Well, I'll jump
Well,
in. I think that one of the really cool things about Seattle fandom is how integrated our pros have been into the fan community. We used to have parties where we would reasonably expect Vonda McIntyre, Joanna Russ, and Octavia Butler all to be in attendance. Greg Bear was with us here for many, many years and used to host fantastic parties at his house on Martha Lake
And
for
that's good. Yeah.
for Clarion. Often that was the last
West.
party of Clarion West, sorry. And someone just said John Kramer, yeah. And
Who is still
I mean,
doing it.
we could keep listing. I mean, there's quite a few. Buzz. I mean, FM Busby
Eleanor,
was
yeah.
also part of the Vanguard group, and you know, the Busbys were basically up for any fannish party, whatever its name was, and so we always got to hang out with them. And Gordon Eklund is a pro and shared a nebula with Greg Benford, and you know, and I always we didn't have pro. I grew up fannishly in Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital city and the home of the university, but it's not a big city. It's not a major center. And at that time, when I was there, we didn't have any pro writers around. And so when I came to Seattle, I was a little starstruck and thinking about, ooh, that's kind of fun. And then, you know, everybody just was very uh there was no separation between fan and pro. And I don't know if there's, you know, I don't mean to denigrate other fan groups at all, but I have heard of fan groups where pros did kind of exist on a separate plane from the fannish hoi polloi, and I never felt that here in Seattle. And I've also felt like, you know, again, about the Clarion West is part of the general encouragement to write. I've always felt like, you know, Seattle fandom is produced lots of interesting writers, both fan and pro. And you know, John, you were talking about the Northwest Review of Books. You know, as you say, you only ran for a year, but I saw every issue because you sent them in trade to SF3 in Madison, Wisconsin, and they ended up in Diane Martin's garage. And I read every issue voraciously, and I thought, geez, you know, how do these guys have time to make a living?
Well, we didn't really.
Well,
The age-old question about fan publishers. But anyway, I feel that that's another element of the flavor of Seattle fandom is that we've always had professionals walking among us, and you know, we help them clean their garage when requested.